The clock on the wall read 9:47 p.m. when Lisa finally got a chance to catch her breath. Her feet were killing her. She'd been on them since 11 that morning, and the lunch rush had been brutal. Then the dinner crowd came in waves, one group after another, until her smile felt permanently frozen on her face. She grabbed a damp cloth and started wiping down table 7 for what felt like the 100th time that day. A family had just left, and they'd let their kids make a complete mess with the breadsticks and marinara sauce. Lisa didn't mind, though. The father had left her a decent tip, and right now every dollar mattered. Romano's Italian restaurant wasn't fancy, but it wasn't a dive either. It sat right in the middle of downtown, the kind of place where locals brought their families for birthdays and couples came for casual date nights. The walls were covered with old photographs of Italy, and Mr. Romano himself had painted a mural of the Tuscan countryside behind the bar. It had charm, even if the carpets were getting worn and the light fixtures were probably older than Lisa herself. At 28 years old, this wasn't exactly where she'd imagined she'd be. But then again, life rarely goes according to plan, does it? 3 years ago, when her grandmother got sick, Lisa had dropped everything. The hospital bills came fast and hard, like punches she couldn't dodge. Her grandmother had been everything to her after her parents died in a car accident when she was 12. Raising a grieving child while working as a seamstress hadn't been easy, but her grandmother never complained. She just loved Lisa with everything she had. When the cancer came, Lisa sold what little she owned to help with treatments. The piano went first. That beautiful old upright that had sat in their living room for as long as Lisa could remember. Her grandmother had taught her to play on that piano, starting when she was just 5 years old. Those were some of her happiest memories, sitting beside her grandmother on that bench, their hands moving together across the keys, filling their small apartment with music. "You have a gift, my darling," her grandmother used to say. "Your fingers tell stories that words cannot, but gifts don't pay medical bills." The piano sold to a young family for $800. Lisa remembered watching them load it into their truck, feeling like she was watching a piece of her soul drive away. Her grandmother had held her hand and said, "Music lives in your heart, not in wooden strings. You'll play again someday." 6 months later, her grandmother was gone. Lisa pushed the memory aside and kept cleaning. She'd gotten good at that over the past few years, pushing things aside so she could just keep moving forward. Grief was heavy, but rent was due on the 1st of every month, and her landlord didn't accept tears as payment. "Hey, Lisa, table 12 needs water refills," called out Tony from behind the bar. He was mixing drinks for a group of businessmen who'd come in late. Their ties loosened and their voices getting louder with each round. "Got it," she said, forcing brightness into her voice. As she filled the water pitcher, her mind drifted to where it always went during these long shifts. In about 15 minutes, she'd clock out. She'd change out of her uniform in the cramped staff bathroom, pull on her comfortable sneakers and start the walk home. But she wouldn't go straight home. She'd take a detour, like she did 3 or 4 nights a week when she wasn't too exhausted to move. 2 blocks from Romano's, there was a community center that stayed open 24 hours. It had been built with some grant money years ago, meant to be a safe place for people in the neighborhood. During the day, it was full of activity. Kids doing homework, seniors playing cards, community meetings happening in the back rooms. But at night, after 10 o'clock, it was mostly empty except for the security guard who sat at the front desk, reading paperback novels. And in the corner of the main recreation room, there was a piano. It wasn't much to look at. The wood finish was scratched and faded. Some of the keys stuck a little. It was definitely out of tune, but to Lisa, it might as well have been a concert grand at Carnegie Hall. It was a piano and she could play it, and that was all that mattered. The first time she discovered it was about a year ago. She'd been walking home late and needed to use a bathroom. The community center was open, so she ducked inside. That's when she heard it, someone playing something clumsy and simple. She followed the sound and found a teenage boy picking out a melody with one finger, trying to teach himself from a YouTube video on his phone. When he left, Lisa sat down at that bench and something inside her chest cracked open. Her fingers found the keys like greeting old friends. She was rusty, terribly so. Her timing was off. Her muscle memory had faded. But it was still there, buried under 3 years of grief and exhaustion and just trying to survive. Since then, she'd been coming back whenever she could. Late at night, when the building was quiet and nobody was around to hear her mistakes, Lisa practiced. She started with the simple pieces she remembered from childhood, the ones her grandmother had taught her first. Then she moved on to more complex compositions, teaching herself from videos and free sheet music she found online. Her phone screen was cracked, making it hard to see sometimes, but she made it work. Nobody knew about this. Not her coworkers at Romano's. Not her few friends who drifted away over the years as life got busy. This was hers, private and precious. In a life that felt like it was all about serving others, taking orders, smiling when she didn't feel like smiling. These hours at the piano were just for her. "Lisa, you heading out soon?" Mr. Romano himself had come out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. He was a good boss, fair and kind, which was more than she could say for some places she'd worked. "Just about done," she said, delivering the water to table 12 with a smile. Good. Hey, listen, tomorrow night is the big charity gala. You're still okay to work it, right?" "I know it's not your usual schedule," Lisa nodded. The gala, she'd almost forgotten. Once a year, Romano's transformed itself into something fancy for a fundraiser that benefited the local children's hospital. They covered the regular tables with white linens, brought in fancy decorations, and charged people $200 a plate. The money went to a good cause, and the staff made decent tips. But Lisa had mixed feelings about working these events. It meant watching wealthy people enjoy luxuries she couldn't imagine affording. It meant listening to live piano music performed by some hired professional, and feeling that familiar ache in her chest, wondering what it would feel like to be the one playing instead of the one serving. "Yeah, I'll be here," she said. "Perfect. It's going to be a great night. We've got a really talented pianist coming in." The guests always loved the music. Lisa smiled and nodded, but inside that old familiar feeling stirred, longing mixed with resignation. Dreams that felt so far away they might as well be on another planet. She finished her closing duties, clocked out, and changed clothes. As she walked out into the cool night air, her feet aching and her back sore, she thought about that piano waiting for her at the community center. Just thinking about it made her walk a little faster. She had no idea that tomorrow night everything was about to change. That the charity gala would become the most important evening of her life. That sometimes the universe waits until we're not looking, until we've given up expecting anything, and then it hands us exactly what we needed all along. But tonight, she was just a tired waitress walking to play a broken piano in an empty room, and somehow that was enough. The next evening, Lisa arrived at Romano's an hour early. The transformation was already underway. The regular tables had been pushed together and draped with crisp white tablecloths. Fresh flowers sat in crystal vases, and someone had hung tiny white lights along the walls, making the whole place sparkle like something out of a magazine. Mr. Romano was everywhere at once, directing the setup, adjusting centerpieces, making sure every detail was perfect. His wife was in the kitchen overseeing the special menu, and the smell of garlic and herbs filled the air so thick you could almost taste it. "Lisa, thank goodness you're here early," Mr. Romano said, rushing past with an armful of fancy cloth napkins. "Can you help fold these?" The guests start arriving at 7 and we're running behind. She spent the next hour helping with last-minute preparations, folding napkins into complicated shapes she had to look up on her phone, polishing wine glasses until they gleamed, setting out name cards at each place setting. The whole time she kept noticing the piano in the corner, a beautiful black grand that Mr. Romano had rented just for tonight. A real professional instrument, not like the beaten-up upright she practiced on at the community center. "That's for Daniel," one of the other servers said, noticing Lisa staring at it. "He's some fancy pianist who plays at hotel lounges downtown. Charges a fortune. But Mr. Romano says he's worth every penny. Apparently half the guests come just to hear him play." Lisa felt that familiar twist in her stomach. She turned away from the piano and went back to folding napkins. By 7 o'clock, the guests started trickling in. They were exactly what Lisa expected. Designer dresses and tailored suits, expensive watches and jewelry that probably cost more than she made in a year. They spoke in confident voices about their businesses and vacation homes, about charity boards and country clubs. Lisa put on her best smile and started taking drink orders. The pianist arrived at 7:30, and Lisa happened to be near the door when he walked in. Daniel was probably in his mid-40s, wearing an elegant suit and carrying a leather folder that probably held his sheet music. He had that air about him, the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you're good at something and getting paid well for it. He sat down at the piano without much fanfare and started playing something smooth and jazzy. The kind of music that made the room feel more sophisticated, that made conversations flow easier and made expensive wine taste even better. Lisa had to admit he was talented. His fingers moved across the keys with practiced ease, and he barely looked at his sheet music. She tried not to listen too closely. It only made that ache in her chest worse, that feeling of wanting something so badly you can almost taste it, but knowing it's not meant for you. Instead, she focused on her job, delivering appetizers, refilling water glasses, smiling until her face hurt. The evening rolled on smoothly until about 8:30. That's when everything changed. Lisa was in the kitchen waiting for a tray of entrees when she heard a commotion near the back entrance. Raised voices, someone saying, "Are you okay?" She stepped out to see what was happening and saw Daniel, the pianist, leaning against the wall near the staff bathroom. His face was pale and he was cradling his right hand against his chest. Mr. Romano rushed over. "What happened?" "My car door," Daniel said, his voice tight with pain. "I went out to get my backup sheet music from the car and the wind caught the door. Slammed it right on my hand. I think I might have broken something." He held out his hand, and even from where Lisa stood, she could see 2 of his fingers were already swelling, turning dark purple. They didn't look right, bent at a slightly wrong angle. "We need to get you to a hospital," Mr. Romano said. I know, Daniel said, wincing. "I'm so sorry. I can't play like this. I can barely move these fingers." The color drained from Mr. Romano's face. Lisa understood why. The music wasn't just background noise at this event. It was a centerpiece. People had specifically mentioned looking forward to the live piano performance when they bought their tickets. Without it, the whole elegant atmosphere would fall flat. "Maybe I can find someone," Mr. Romano said, already pulling out his phone. "There must be another pianist who's available tonight. Someone who can fill in." But Lisa knew, and probably everyone else knew, that finding a professional pianist on zero notice on a Friday night was basically impossible. Anyone good enough would already be booked. Mr. Romano made 3 calls right there in the hallway. Each one ended with disappointment. No one was available. One pianist was out of town. Another was already performing at a wedding. The third didn't answer at all. "This is a disaster," Mr. Romano muttered, running his hand through his hair. "What am I going to tell people?" Lisa stood there frozen. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. A voice in her head was screaming at her to speak up, to say something. But another voice, louder and more familiar, was listing all the reasons why she should keep her mouth shut. She was exhausted from being on her feet all day. She hadn't played in front of anyone in years. Maybe not since she was a teenager at her grandmother's church. She'd never played on a real grand piano, only that beat-up upright. She was wearing a stained work uniform and her hair was falling out of its ponytail. These people expected a professional, someone polished and confident, not a worn-out waitress who practiced in secret. "Does anyone here play piano?" Mr. Romano called out, desperation clear in his voice. "Anyone at all?" The kitchen staff exchanged glances. A couple of servers shook their heads. Lisa felt like time had slowed down, like she was watching this moment from outside her own body. Then Jenny, one of the other waitresses, turned to her. "Hey, don't you play? I remember months ago you mentioned something about piano lessons when you were a kid." Every eye turned to Lisa. She felt her face go hot. I used to," Lisa stammered. "But I haven't really played for anyone in a long time. And I'm not professional or anything. I just mess around sometimes." "Can you play well enough to fill in?" Mr. Romano asked, and there was so much hope in his voice that it almost hurt to hear. "I'm not expecting a concert, just something to keep the atmosphere going. Background music like what Daniel was doing." Lisa's mind raced. This was insane. She couldn't do this. Could she? Her fingers knew the keys, that much was true. She'd been practicing nearly every night for a year. But there was a massive difference between playing alone in an empty room and performing for a room full of wealthy strangers who'd paid good money to be here. "The piano's right there," Jenny said encouragingly. "And honestly, what's the worst that could happen? If you're terrible, we just tell people we couldn't find a replacement. But at least we tried, right?" Daniel, still holding his injured hand, spoke up. "Look, I'm sorry to put anyone on the spot, but if you know even the basics, that's better than nothing. These crowds are usually pretty forgiving if you just keep the mood light." Lisa looked at the piano sitting in the corner of the dining room. From here, she could see the keys gleaming under the soft lights. Her fingers actually tingled, like they wanted to move, like they remembered what to do, even if her brain was full of doubt. She thought about her grandmother, about all those hours they'd spent together at the piano in their small apartment. "You have a gift, my darling. Your fingers tell stories that words cannot." Her grandmother had believed in her, even when Lisa didn't believe in herself. And suddenly, before she could talk herself out of it, Lisa heard herself say, "Okay, I'll try." The relief on Mr. Romano's face was immediate. "Thank you, Lisa. Seriously, thank you. You're saving us here." "I need maybe 10 minutes to change and clean up a bit," Lisa said, her voice shaking slightly. "And I'm warning you, I might not be very good." "You'll be great," Jenny said, squeezing her arm. "Go get ready." Lisa rushed to the staff bathroom, her heart hammering. She caught sight of herself in the mirror. Her mascara was slightly smudged. Her hair was a mess, and there was a pasta sauce stain on her shirt. She looked exactly like what she was, a tired waitress at the end of a long shift. She quickly washed her face, fixed her hair into a neater ponytail, and changed into the only clean shirt she had in her locker, a simple black blouse she kept for emergencies. It wasn't fancy, but it was better than the stained uniform. Her hands were shaking as she buttoned it. What was she doing? This was crazy. These people were going to know immediately that she wasn't a professional. They'd probably complain. Mr. Romano might regret asking her. She'd probably embarrass herself in front of everyone. But even as these thoughts swirled through her mind, her fingers were flexing, remembering. Muscle memory was already kicking in, running through scales and chord progressions she'd practiced 1,000 times. She took a deep breath, looked at herself one more time in the mirror and whispered, "You can do this." Then she walked out to face the piano, and whatever came next. Walking across that dining room felt like the longest journey of Lisa's life. Every step seemed to echo, even though the room was full of conversation and the clinking of silverware against plates. She could feel eyes on her, some curious, some barely noticing, as this waitress made her way to the piano in the corner. Her legs felt weird, kind of numb and shaky at the same time. Her palms were sweating. What was she thinking? These people had been listening to a professional just minutes ago, someone who'd trained for years and performed for a living. And now they were getting her, a waitress who practiced on a broken piano in the middle of the night when nobody was around to hear her mistakes. She reached the piano bench and sat down slowly. The seat was still warm from Daniel. The piano was beautiful up close, its black finish so glossy she could see her reflection in it. She placed her hands on the keys, and they felt different from the community center piano, smoother, more responsive. This was a real instrument, the kind she'd only dreamed of playing. Mr. Romano caught her eye from across the room and gave her an encouraging nod. Jenny gave her a thumbs up from near the kitchen door. Taking a deep breath, Lisa positioned her fingers over the keys. She started with something safe, a simple classical piece that she knew by heart, one her grandmother had taught her when she was just 10 years old. It was gentle, unassuming, the kind of music that could blend into the background. Her fingers trembled slightly on the first few notes, but then muscle memory kicked in and they began to move more naturally. The conversations around her continued. People were eating, laughing, talking about their businesses and their lives. Nobody seemed to notice that the pianist had changed, that the professional had been replaced by someone who had no business being there. And honestly, that was fine with Lisa. Better than fine. She didn't want attention. She just wanted to help Mr. Romano out and get through this without making a fool of herself. As she played, something strange started to happen. The nervousness began to fade. Her shoulders, which had been tensed up around her ears, started to relax. Her breathing steadied. This wasn't so different from playing at the community center, she realized. It was just her and the piano, having a conversation that didn't need words. She moved into another piece, this one slightly more complex. Her fingers found their way across the keys with growing confidence. She'd practiced this one just last week, working through the difficult passages over and over until they felt natural. Now, playing on this beautiful instrument, it came even easier than it had on that old upright. Nobody was paying attention to her, and that was perfect. She was doing exactly what Mr. Romano had asked, providing background music, filling the space with something pleasant while people enjoyed their meals and their conversations. She could do this. She was doing this, but then something shifted inside her. Maybe it was the feel of this incredible piano under her fingers. Maybe it was the fact that she was actually here, actually playing for people after all these years of hiding her music away. Maybe it was thinking about her grandmother and how proud she would have been to see Lisa at this moment. Whatever it was, Lisa felt something open up in her chest, a courage she didn't know she had, a desire to play something real, something that mattered, something that came from the deepest part of her soul. She transitioned into a piece by Chopin, one she'd been working on for months. It was challenging, way beyond simple background music. Her grandmother had once told her that this particular composition was about longing and hope, about missing something precious and believing you might find it again someday. Lisa had cried the first time she'd played through it at the community center. Every note seemed to speak to her own life, her own losses, her own quiet dreams that she'd buried under bills and exhaustion and just trying to survive day after day. Now, as her fingers moved through the piece, she forgot where she was. She forgot about the guests, about Mr. Romano, about being a waitress in a borrowed black blouse. She was just inside the music, letting it flow through her like water, like breath, like something that had been dammed up for too long and was finally breaking free. Her eyes closed. She didn't need to see the keys anymore. Her hands knew where to go. They'd memorized every note, every pause, every moment where the music swelled with emotion or pulled back to something soft and tender. She poured everything into it. All the grief over her grandmother. All the exhaustion from working double shifts. All the dreams she'd pushed down because they seemed impossible. All the late nights practicing alone, hoping that somehow, someday, music would be more than just her secret. The difficult passages came. The parts where her fingers had to move fast and precise, where the timing had to be perfect. She'd stumbled over these sections so many times during practice, had wanted to give up, had convinced herself she'd never get them right. But now they flowed. On this piano, with this moment, everything she'd practiced came together like pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. She didn't notice that the room had started to change. Didn't notice that conversations were trailing off, that forks were being set down gently on plates, that heads were turning toward the corner where she sat. She was somewhere else entirely, in a place where only the music existed. The piece built to its emotional peak, and Lisa's whole body moved with it. Her shoulders swayed slightly. Her head tilted. Every part of her was channeling something bigger than herself, something that couldn't be contained in words or thoughts, only in these notes that filled the air like light. And then, gradually, the music softened again. The Chopin piece always ended quietly, like a whisper, like a memory fading but never fully gone. Lisa's fingers moved through the final phrases with tender precision. Each note was placed carefully, deliberately, like stones in a Japanese garden. The last chord hung in the air, and she let it fade completely before lifting her hands from the keys. Only then did she open her eyes. The silence hit her first. Complete, total silence. No conversations, no clinking silverware, no ambient noise at all. For a heartbeat, panic flooded through her. Had she messed up? Had she been so lost in the music that she'd played something terrible and not even realized it? Then she saw their faces. Every single person in the room was looking at her. And they weren't looking with annoyance or confusion. Some of them had their hands pressed to their chests. Several had tears streaming down their faces. A woman in a blue dress near the front had her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with something that looked like wonder. Mr. Romano stood near the kitchen door, completely frozen, his eyes glistening with moisture. Lisa's heart started pounding again, but this time it was different. This wasn't nervousness. This was something else entirely, something she couldn't name because she'd never felt it before. Then someone started clapping. Just one person at first, a man in a gray suit near the back. Then another person joined in. And another. And suddenly the entire room erupted into applause. Not polite, obligatory applause. Real applause. Thunderous, enthusiastic, the kind that filled the whole space and seemed to shake the walls. People were standing up. A standing ovation for her, for Lisa, the waitress who'd been serving them drinks an hour ago. Some people were still crying. Others were smiling so wide it looked like their faces might break. A few were shouting bravo, like she'd just performed at Carnegie Hall instead of a local restaurant. Lisa sat frozen on the bench, her hands still hovering over the keys, unable to process what was happening. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. They happened in movies and stories in other people's lives, not to tired waitresses who practiced in secret and dreamed small because dreaming big hurt too much. But it was real. The applause continued, washing over her in waves. Jenny was jumping up and down near the kitchen, clapping so hard it had to hurt. Mr. Romano had tears running down his face, and he was mouthing "thank you" over and over again. An older woman in an elegant purple dress approached the piano, still clapping. When the applause finally started to die down, she spoke loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Young lady, that was extraordinary. I've attended hundreds of charity events, heard countless professional musicians, and that was one of the most moving performances I've ever witnessed. Who are you? Where did you train?" Lisa's mouth opened, but for a moment no words came out. Her voice, when she finally found it, sounded small and uncertain. I'm just a waitress here. I taught myself mostly. I practice at the community center down the street." The woman's eyebrows shot up. Others were gathering around the piano now, drawn by curiosity and genuine amazement. A man in an expensive suit leaned in. "You're self-taught? That's remarkable. Have you considered performing professionally?" Lisa wanted to laugh. Professionally? She could barely afford her rent. She had student loans from a degree she'd never finished. She worked 50-hour weeks just to keep her head above water. Professional musicians had training, connections, money for auditions and the right clothes and all the things she couldn't even begin to afford. But before she could say any of this, Mr. Romano was there, his hand on her shoulder. "Lisa, why didn't you tell me you could play like this? I've known you for 3 years. She looked up at him, still feeling like she was in a dream. "I didn't think it mattered," she said quietly. "It was just something I did for myself." "Just something you did for yourself?" The woman in purple shook her head in disbelief. "My dear, you have a gift. A genuine, profound gift." The guests were returning to their seats now, but the energy in the room had completely changed. People kept glancing over at the piano at Lisa with new eyes. She wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't just the waitress. She was something else. Something she'd never allowed herself to be before, someone she'd never imagined she could become. Lisa somehow made it, through the rest of the evening in a daze. Mr. Romano insisted she didn't need to serve anymore, that she should just play piano for the remainder of the event. So she did. Though her hands were still trembling slightly from the adrenaline, she played softer pieces now, trying to let the guests return to their conversations and their meals. But people kept watching her. It was the strangest feeling, being seen after years of being invisible. When the event finally ended around 11, Lisa helped clean up like she always did. But it was different now. The other servers kept giving her these looks, part amazement, part something else. Maybe a little bit of distance, like she'd suddenly become someone they didn't quite know anymore. Jenny was the only one who acted normal, throwing her arm around Lisa's shoulders and saying, "Girl, you've been holding out on us. All this time we had no idea." As Lisa was gathering the last of the tablecloths, the woman in the purple dress approached her again. Up close, she looked to be in her 60s with kind eyes and smile lines around her mouth. She held out a business card. "My name is Helen Chen," she said. "I teach piano at the Riverside Music Academy. I've been teaching for 35 years and I can recognize raw talent when I hear it. Would you be interested in lessons? Free of charge. I'd consider it an honor to work with someone who has your natural ability." Lisa stared at the card like it might disappear if she blinked. "Free? But why would you?" "Because music matters," Helen said simply. "And because I believe everyone deserves a chance to develop their gifts, regardless of their financial situation. You've clearly been working hard on your own, but imagine what you could do with proper guidance. Think about it at least. My number's on the card." Before Lisa could respond, a tall man in a navy suit came over. He introduced himself as Robert Patterson, the manager of the Riverside Community Theater. "We host small concerts and recitals," he explained. "Local artists, community performances, that sort of thing. I'd love to have you perform sometime. Nothing huge, maybe 50 or 60 people in the audience. But it would be a real venue, a real concert. If you're interested." He handed her his card too. Then came a woman named Christine who owned a coffee shop downtown and wanted to know if Lisa would play there on weekend mornings. "I can't pay much," she admitted. "But it's something. Maybe $50 per session, plus tips and free coffee." People love live music with their lattes. 3 more people gave her their contact information before the night was over. A man who ran a local arts festival, a woman who organized events at the library, someone who taught music at the community college and thought Lisa should consider enrolling in classes. By the time Lisa left Romano's that night, she had 7 business cards in her pocket, and her head was spinning. She walked home in the cool night air, not even thinking about stopping at the community center. She was too overwhelmed to play, too confused, too afraid that if she touched a piano right now, she'd wake up and discover this whole evening had been some kind of exhausted hallucination. She barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those faces looking at her, heard that applause, felt the weight of those business cards in her pocket like they were made of lead instead of paper. What was she supposed to do with all this? These opportunities felt impossibly big, like doors opening to rooms she'd never imagined she'd be allowed to enter. The next morning, Lisa sat at her tiny kitchen table with a cup of instant coffee, the business cards spread out in front of her. In the harsh light of day, they seemed almost threatening. Each one represented a choice, a step towards something that terrified her as much as it thrilled her. Helen Chen's card kept drawing her eye. Piano lessons. Real professional instruction. The kind of training she'd dreamed about when she was a kid, before life got complicated and expensive. But even though Helen had said they'd be free, Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't deserve it. Free things came with expectations, didn't they? What if she wasn't as good as Helen thought? What if last night had been a fluke and she'd just embarrass herself? Her phone buzzed. A text from Mr. Romano. "Lisa, can you come in today? I know it's your day off, but I need to talk to you about something. It's good news, I promise." An hour later, Lisa sat across from Mr. Romano in his small office above the restaurant. He was practically bouncing with excitement, which was unusual for him. He was normally pretty calm and measured. "I've been thinking about this all night," he said. "What if you played here regularly, not just for special events? What if we did live piano music 3 nights a week? Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Our busiest nights. I think people would love it. I think it would make Romano's something special." Lisa's heart started racing. "You want me to play here? Regularly?" "Yes, and I'd pay you, of course. Not server wages, performer wages. Let's say $200 per night. That's $600 a week just for the piano. You could still waitress the other nights if you wanted, or..." He paused, looking almost shy. "Or maybe you'd want to reduce your serving shifts. Focus more on the music. $200 a night." Lisa did the math quickly in her head. That was an extra $2,400 a month, almost as much as she made working 50-hour weeks as a server. For doing something she loved, something that didn't leave her feet aching and her back sore. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes." Mr. Romano grinned. "Lisa, last night changed something. People are already calling, asking when you'll play again. Someone posted a video on social media. Did you know that? It's been shared hundreds of times already." "A video?" Lisa felt her stomach drop. "Someone recorded me?" Mr. Romano turned his computer screen toward her. There it was, a clip of her playing the Chopin piece, filmed from someone's phone. The video quality wasn't great, but you could hear the music clearly. And you could see her face, eyes closed, completely lost in the performance. The caption read, "Hidden talent discovered at local charity event. This waitress plays like an angel." The view count was over 50,000. 50,000 people had watched her play. The comments were full of people saying things like, "This made me cry, and who is she? And more talented than half the professionals I've paid to see." Lisa couldn't breathe for a second. This was too much, too fast, too public. But then she kept reading the comments. Someone had written, "This reminds me why I fell in love with music in the first place." Another said, "I've been having the worst week, and this brought me so much peace. Thank you." A third, "My daughter wants to learn piano now because of this video. She watched it 5 times. Her music had touched people. Strangers, people she'd never meet, had felt something because of what she'd played. Wasn't that what her grandmother had always told her? That music was a gift meant to be shared, not hidden away? So what do you think, Mr. Romano asked gently, about playing here regularly? Lisa looked at him, then back at the screen with its thousands of views and hundreds of kind comments. She thought about Helen Chen offering free lessons, about Robert Patterson wanting her to perform at a real theater, about all those business cards sitting on her kitchen table. She thought about her grandmother and about that old piano they'd had to sell. Music lives in your heart, not in wood and strings. You'll play again someday. Maybe someday was now. Yes, Lisa said, and saying it out loud felt like jumping off a cliff, terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Yes, I'll do it. Over the next week, Lisa's life started to shift in ways she couldn't have predicted. She called Helen Chen and set up her first lesson. Walking into the music academy felt surreal. The building smelled like rosin and old wood, and she could hear different instruments being practiced in various rooms. Piano, violin, flute, all creating this chaotic symphony of people learning and growing. Helen's studio had a beautiful grand piano, even nicer than the one at Romano's. During that first lesson, Helen listened to Lisa play and then sat quietly for a moment. "You've developed some bad habits from teaching yourself," she finally said. "Your posture needs work, and there are technical things we'll need to address, but Lisa, you have something that can't be taught. You have soul. You play from your heart. And that's what makes people stop and listen." They worked together for 2 hours that first day. Helen was patient but demanding, making Lisa repeat passages until they were cleaner, teaching her breathing techniques and ways to use her whole body, not just her fingers. It was exhausting and wonderful, and by the end, Lisa's brain hurt from concentrating so hard. "Same time next week?" Helen asked as Lisa was leaving. "Actually," Lisa said, gathering her courage, "could we do twice a week? I want to learn as much as I can, as fast as I can." Helen smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." Lisa's first official night playing at Romano's was on a Friday. She arrived early, nervous all over again, but this time it was different. This time she wasn't filling in for someone else. This time she belonged there. Mr. Romano had even printed up little cards for the tables. Live piano performed by Lisa Martinez, Friday through Sunday evenings. The restaurant filled up quickly. Some faces were familiar, regulars who'd heard about her playing. But there were new faces too, people who'd seen the video and wanted to hear her in person. Jenny, working the tables, kept giving her encouraging smiles. Lisa sat down at the piano, took a deep breath and began to play. This time there was no panic, no questioning whether she belonged here. Her fingers found the keys like coming home. She played the music she loved, the pieces she'd practiced alone for so long, but now she was sharing them. Every note was a gift, given freely to whoever wanted to receive it. Between songs, she heard snippets of conversation from nearby tables. "She's even better in person. I could listen to her all night. We should come here every Friday." When she finished her first set and took a break, a young girl, maybe 10 years old, approached her shyly. "Excuse me," the girl said. "I saw your video online. I just started piano lessons, and my teacher is really strict and it's kind of hard. But watching you made me remember why I wanted to learn. You look so happy when you play." Lisa crouched down to the girl's level. "What's your name?" "Sophie." "Well, Sophie, can I tell you a secret? It is hard. Learning piano is really hard, but the hard parts are what make it special. Keep practicing, okay? Even when it's frustrating. Especially when it's frustrating. Because someday you'll sit down and play something beautiful, and you'll realize all that hard work was worth it." Sophie beamed and nodded enthusiastically before running back to her parents' table. As Lisa returned to the piano for her second set, she realized something. Her life hadn't magically become perfect. She still had bills to pay, still had struggles and worries and hard days ahead. But something fundamental had shifted. She'd spent so long just surviving, just getting through each day. Now she was actually living. And it had all started with one terrifying decision to sit down at a piano and play. 6 months changed everything. but not in the way movies make you think it happens. There was no record deal, no overnight fame, no fairy tale ending tied up with a perfect bow. Real life doesn't work like that. But what Lisa got was something better, something more solid and lasting. The video of her playing had spread further than anyone expected. Not viral in the millions of views sense, but enough that people knew about her. Local news did a small feature. A radio station interviewed her. Suddenly, people in her neighborhood would recognize her at the grocery store. "Hey, aren't you the piano girl?" they'd say. And she'd never quite gotten used to being recognized for anything other than bringing someone the wrong salad dressing. Playing at Romano's 3 nights a week became the anchor of her new life. The restaurant was busier than ever on those nights, and Mr. Romano had to start taking reservations. People requested songs. They brought their friends and family to listen. Some came back week after week, becoming regulars who'd wave at her when they walked in. Lisa still waitressed 2 nights a week, not because she had to anymore, but because she wanted to stay connected to where she'd come from. Plus, Jenny had become her closest friend, and those shifts together felt important. Jenny was always asking about the music lessons, living vicariously through Lisa's progress, cheering for every small victory. The lessons with Helen were transforming her playing in ways Lisa hadn't imagined possible. All those years of teaching herself meant she'd developed her own style, but Helen showed her techniques that made difficult pieces suddenly manageable. Proper finger positioning, how to use the weight of her arms, the way to approach a challenging passage with patience instead of frustration. "You're progressing faster than any student I've had," Helen told her during one lesson. "That's because you already put in the hours. You already love the music. I'm just giving you the tools to refine what you've built." 3 months after that first charity gala, Lisa performed at the Riverside Community Theater. It was the first time she'd played a full concert, just her and the piano and 60 people who'd bought tickets specifically to hear her. She wore a simple black dress that she'd found at a thrift store and felt fancier than she had in years. Standing on that small stage, looking out at the filled seats, Lisa felt that same terror from the charity gala night, but this time she knew what was on the other side of that fear. She knew what happened when you pushed through it. She played for 90 minutes, a mix of classical pieces and some more contemporary songs she'd arranged herself. At one point, she talked to the audience between pieces, something Helen had encouraged her to do. "This next one is dedicated to my grandmother," she said, her voice catching slightly. "She taught me that music isn't about perfection. It's about truth. About sharing what's in your heart even when you're scared people won't understand." After the concert, people lined up to talk to her. An older man with tears in his eyes told her that her playing reminded him of his late wife, who'd been a pianist. A teenager asked for advice about pursuing music when her parents wanted her to study something practical. A woman thanked her for making her feel something she hadn't felt in years, though she couldn't quite name what that something was. But the person who changed everything was a man named David Kim, who waited until everyone else had left. He was in his 50s, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, and he had a gentle, observant way about him. "I run a program," he explained, "called Keys to Hope. We bring music education to underprivileged kids who couldn't otherwise afford lessons. Schools keep cutting music programs, and private lessons are expensive. We've been doing this for about 10 years now, working with volunteers and donated instruments." Lisa nodded, wondering where this was going. "I've been looking for someone to teach piano at our main center," David continued. 2 afternoons a week working with kids aged 8 to 16. The pay isn't great, I'll be honest. But watching your video, seeing you tonight, I think you'd be perfect. You know what it's like to have limited resources but unlimited passion. These kids need someone who understands that. Teaching. Lisa had never considered it. She was still learning herself, still figuring things out. "I don't know if I'm qualified," she said hesitantly. "You're more qualified than you think," David said. "These kids don't need someone with a fancy degree from a conservatory. They need someone who believes in them, someone who knows that circumstances don't define potential. That's you, Lisa." He handed her his card and told her to think about it. She didn't need to think long. 2 days later, she called him and said yes. Her first day teaching at Keys to Hope was chaotic and beautiful and terrifying all at once. 8 kids showed up to the piano room, ranging from a shy 8-year-old named Maya, who'd never touched a piano before, to a 15-year-old named Tyler, who was already pretty good but had no one to push him further. Lisa taught them the same way her grandmother had taught her, with patience and encouragement and the understanding that mistakes were just part of the process. She showed them that music wasn't something reserved for rich kids with expensive instruments and private tutors. It was for everyone. It belonged to anyone willing to sit down and learn. Maya, the shy 8-year-old, struggled at first. Her fingers were small and she got frustrated easily. But Lisa remembered being that age, remembered how her grandmother would sit beside her and say, "Try again, darling. You're closer than you think." One afternoon, about 2 months into the program, Lisa was working with Maya on a simple piece when the little girl suddenly played through it without a single mistake. Maya's eyes went wide with surprise, and then she burst into the biggest smile Lisa had ever seen. "I did it," Maya shouted. "Did you hear? I really did it." Lisa had to blink back tears. "I heard. You were amazing." Watching Maya's joy, Lisa understood something profound. This was why music mattered. Not for the applause or the recognition or even for her own satisfaction. It mattered because it connected people. It gave them a way to express things they couldn't put into words. It made them feel less alone. The video that had started everything kept circulating in small ways. Every few weeks, someone new would discover it and share it. Lisa's follower count on social media grew slowly but steadily. People started asking her to play at weddings, small private events, church services. She said yes to the ones that felt right and learned to say no to the ones that didn't. About 5 months after the charity gala, Daniel, the pianist who'd injured his hand, reached out to her. His hand had healed completely and he wanted to meet for coffee. Lisa agreed, curious and a little nervous. They met at a cafe downtown and Daniel was warm and encouraging. "I've been following your journey," he said. "What happened to you that night? It was supposed to be my gig, but I think it was meant to be yours. I've been playing professionally for 20 years, and somewhere along the way I forgot why I started. Watching your video reminded me. You play with joy. Never lose that." They talked about music for over an hour. Before they parted, Daniel gave her advice about managing performance anxiety, about pacing herself, about protecting her passion when it starts becoming a job. The moment you start resenting the piano is the moment you need to step back and remember why you fell in love with it in the first place, he said. Lisa thought about that conversation often in the weeks that followed. She was busier than she'd ever been. Playing at Romano's, teaching at Keys to Hope, taking lessons with Helen twice a week, occasional performances at various venues. It would have been easy to let it all become overwhelming, to turn music into just another obligation. But she made a promise to herself. Once a week, usually late on Tuesday nights after her waitressing shift, she still went to the community center. She'd sit at that old, out-of-tune upright piano where this whole journey had really started, and she'd play just for herself. No audience, no expectations, no pressure. Just her and the music, the way it had been during all those lonely practice sessions before anyone knew her name. One evening at Romano's, about 6 months after everything changed, Lisa was taking a break between sets when a young woman approached her. She looked to be in her early 20s, wearing a food service uniform from another restaurant. "I hope this isn't weird," the woman said nervously, "but I work at a diner across town and I saw your video. The one from the charity event. I play guitar, but I've never played for anyone except my roommate. I'm too scared. But watching you, seeing how you just went for it, it made me think maybe I could try too." Lisa smiled, remembering how terrified she'd been that night. "Are you going to do it? Try, I mean?" The woman shrugged. "Maybe, probably, I don't know. It's just scary, you know?" "It is scary," Lisa agreed. "But here's what I learned. The scary things are usually the ones worth doing. And you know what? Even if you mess up, even if it doesn't go perfectly, at least you'll know you tried. That matters more than you think." The woman thanked her and walked away, and Lisa hoped she'd actually follow through. She hoped that maybe her story had given someone else the courage to take their own leap.